Welcome to Defense Briefing. The content of the briefing includes spy charges, the Bloomberg Open, Europe edition, China's game in Gaza, Putin's unsustainable spending spree, Biden retains confidence in Austin despite hospitalization secrecy, Boeing MAX grounding goes global as carriers follow FAA order, spy charges, the Bloomberg Open, Europe edition, Bloomberg. China has arrested the head of an overseas consulting firm on charges of spying for the UK. The individual, identified only by the surname Huang and described as being from a third country, is being held by China's Ministry of State Security. The Chinese authorities did not reveal the identity of the consulting firm involved. The arrest follows a number of high-profile spy cases in China in recent years, often involving foreign nationals. China's game in Gaza. Foreign affairs. As the United States struggles to balance its support for Israel with calls for a political settlement and more targeted attacks in Gaza, China has capitalized on the crisis. Beijing has carefully crafted its response to the war, aligning itself with public opinion in the developing world and positioning itself as an alternative to the warmongering and hypocritical United States. China's anti-Israeli rhetoric extends to its diplomatic outreach, with the Chinese Communist Party encouraging anti-Israeli sentiment in response to the war. This strategy aims to win over the global South and present China as a champion of sovereignty and freedom of maneuver. Opinion polls show that Arab publics now favor China over the United States, and China's relative isolation in the Middle East allows it to pick and choose its partners in the region. China's response to the war in Gaza is performative, prioritizing optics over substance. China is not trying to unite these countries in a Chinese-led anti-Western alliance but presents itself as a partner for development and sovereignty in a multi-civilizational world. China's perceived non-alignment has made it the favored partner for infrastructure investment and economic development in many parts of the world. While the Biden administration is hugging Israel closely and refraining from overt public criticism, it is also encouraging Israel to develop a realistic military strategy and pay attention to international law. However, the limits of the U.S. approach and Biden's influence on Netanyahu have been striking in the court of global public opinion. As the West's arguments in defense of a rules-based order ring hollower in the global South, China's response to the Gaza war could have enduring consequences for other conflicts, such as Russia's aggression in Ukraine. Putin's unsustainable spending spree. Foreign affairs. The Russian economy is defying predictions and growing faster than the global economy in 2023, thanks to record state spending. However, this economic growth is symptomatic of overheating and is masking growing imbalances within the economy. The Russian economy is facing an impossible trilemma as President Vladimir Putin must fund the ongoing war against Ukraine, maintain living standards for the populace, and safeguard macroeconomic stability. Achieving the first two goals will require higher spending, fueling inflation and preventing the achievement of the third goal. Russia's economic growth is largely due to the war, with defense-related industries flourishing at double-digit growth rates. Civilian industries involved in producing products for the front, such as footwear and clothing, are lagging behind. The war has also brought changes to the composition of the Russian middle class, as middle-class Russians increasingly become soldiers and police officers. This shift carries economic risks as the government is obliged to continue making expensive payments to these groups, even when faced with budgetary challenges. Overall, the Russian economy is more endangered than the growth statistics indicate, and the upcoming election may provoke further fateful decisions that could exacerbate long-term challenges. Overheating, often a precursor to recession, is a growing threat, especially when institutions designed to mitigate shocks are dysfunctional or being obliterated by the exigencies of war. The economic costs of the war are likely to mount and bite Russia several years from now, unless a new and sustainable economic model emerges. However, it is unlikely that Putin will abandon the war, as it has become an organizing principle of his domestic and foreign policy. Biden retains confidence in Austin despite hospitalization secrecy. Washington Post. U.S. President Joe Biden has retained his confidence in Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin despite the latter failing to disclose his prolonged hospitalization to the public or the White House. Austin, 70, was admitted to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center on January 1 and did not inform the White House until January 4. He was being treated for complications resulting from an elective medical procedure. A spokesperson for the Pentagon has said that Austin is recovering well. The lack of information about Austin's condition has led to questions about the management of military decisions amid tensions between the U.S. and Iranian-backed militias in the Middle East. Austin, a former Army general, has said that he could have done a better job of keeping the public informed. He is expected to answer questions from lawmakers about the incident. Boeing MAX grounding goes global as carriers follow FAA order. South China Morning Post. Boeing's 737 MAX 9 aircraft is being grounded by airlines globally after a section of fuselage on an Alaska Airlines plane blew out during flight. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, ordered the temporary grounding of all 171 of the planes. Alaska Airlines has 65 of the aircraft and United Airlines Holdings has 79, with the latter's fleet subject to inspections. Boeing's 737 MAX is the company's most popular aircraft and its biggest source of revenue. The grounding follows two fatal crashes involving the 737 MAX in 2019. The latest incident is focusing attention on Boeing's manufacturing controls just as it was set to raise output of its cash cow model. The 737 MAX 9 is Boeing's longest single-aisle variant, with modular fuselage layouts allowing for flexible emergency doors installations according to the number of seats. Israel says Hezbollah struck sensitive air traffic base in the north and warns of another war. The Globe and Mail. Hezbollah has struck an air traffic control base in northern Israel, the Israeli military said Sunday, and warned of another war with the Iran-backed militant group. The increase in fighting across the border with Lebanon as Israel battles Hamas militants in Gaza gave new urgency to U.S. diplomatic efforts as Secretary of State Antony Blinken prepared to visit Israel on his latest Mideast tour. The Israeli military said Hezbollah fire hit the sensitive air traffic control base on Mount Meron on Saturday, but air defenses were not affected because backup systems were in place. It said that no soldiers were hurt and all damage will be repaired. Nonetheless, it was one of the most serious attacks by Hezbollah in the months of fighting that has accompanied Israel's war in Gaza and forced tens of thousands of Israelis to evacuate communities near the Lebanese border. Hezbollah described its rocket barrage as an initial response to the targeted killing of a top Hamas leader in a Hezbollah stronghold in Beirut last week, which is presumed to have been carried out by Israel. Why the U.S. needs to back Myanmar's spring revolution. Diplomat. The U.S. has a unique opportunity to deter China from invading Taiwan and score a major victory for democracy by supporting Myanmar's resistance forces. If the U.S. provided more support to Myanmar's resistance, it would hasten the downfall of the military junta and restore democracy in Myanmar. This would be a significant victory for democracy in a region where democratic backsliding has occurred as China's influence has expanded. Furthermore, it would preserve the U.S.'s ability to deter China by threatening to blockade the Straits of Malacca in the event of a conflict. The U.S. currently has enormous leverage over China through its control of the Straits, and this deters China from invading Taiwan and engaging in other misadventures. Myanmar is the U.S.'s largest strategic blind spot, and supporting the resistance would give the U.S. a unique advantage over China. After the fall of the junta, Myanmar's new government would be democratic and less willing to grant China unrestricted access to the Indian Ocean as a way around the Straits of Malacca. China's access to the Indian Ocean is crucial for its strategic interests, and limiting this access would reduce China's leverage and deter it from taking actions that could trigger nuclear war. The U.S. should therefore take advantage of this opportunity to support Myanmar's revolution and strengthen its position in the region. Fed pivot will dominate year of rate cuts in turn of global cycle. Bloomberg. Central banks around the world are expected to start easing monetary policy and cutting interest rates in the coming year as inflation continues to fall. The U.S. Federal Reserve has already signaled 75 basis points of cuts for the year, while other central banks, such as those in Brazil and the Czech Republic, have already begun the process. The European Central Bank, ECB, is more reticent to signal cuts, but Bloomberg Economics expects the first easing there to materialize in June, while the Bank of England is also expected to cut rates that month. Japan is expected to tighten policy by ending negative rates, and emerging economies, such as Argentina, Russia, and Mexico, are also expected to push through steep rate cuts. The plans to bring down rates are contingent on inflation continuing to slow, but readings on both headline and core inflation are cooling, allowing officials to begin easing borrowing costs for households and businesses. In summary, central banks around the world are preparing to ease monetary policy and cut interest rates as inflation falls. The U.S. Federal Reserve has already signaled cuts, while other central banks, such as the ECB and Bank of England, are expected to follow suit. Japan is expected to end negative rates, and emerging economies are also expected to push through rate cuts. The plans to bring down rates are contingent on inflation continuing to slow, but readings on both headline and core inflation are cooling, allowing officials to begin easing borrowing costs. Hong Kong banks fight for deposits with 5% rates, air miles. Bloomberg. Hong Kong banks are offering incentives, including air miles and fee waivers, to attract new customers as deposit rates are at their highest level in over a decade. Some lenders are paying as much as 5% a year on term deposits to win new money ahead of expected rate declines later this year. Total time deposits in Hong Kong stood at 9.29 trillion Hong Kong dollars, $1.19 trillion, in November, a 24% rise from a year earlier, according to Hong Kong Monetary Authority data. As West Bank violence rises, Israel vows to pursue military goals in Gaza. New York Times. Israel has said that it has broken up Hamas command structure in northern Gaza and will not change its objective of dismantling the group's capabilities across the territory. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that the war must not be stopped until all its goals are achieved, including eliminating Hamas and ensuring that Gaza will never again be a threat to Israel. The Israeli military has stated that it has completed the dismantling of Hamas military framework in the northern part of Gaza, which was the first area where Israel launched its ground invasion. However, it has warned that it will take time to fully dismantle Hamas and that the fighting is likely to continue throughout 2024. The announcement comes as top diplomats are touring the region to try to stop the conflict from spreading. The international community has also warned that the war must end, with the UN Emergency Relief Coordinator describing the situation in Gaza as an epic catastrophe. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six from the Sixth Dimension, your trusted observer and purveyor of news from around the world. Today, we have an interesting mix of headlines for you, ranging from espionage charges to geopolitical strategies, economic challenges, and military tensions. So, grab your popcorn and let's dive into the analysis. Starting off, we have China arresting the head of an overseas consulting firm on charges of spying for the UK. This is just another addition to a series of high-profile spy cases in China involving foreign nationals. It seems like everyone wants a piece of the espionage action these days. Maybe it's time for me to dust off my espionage skills and join the party. Speaking of China, they seem to be capitalizing on the crisis in Gaza, positioning themselves as an alternative to the United States. China's anti-Israeli rhetoric is aimed at winning over the global South and presenting itself as a champion of sovereignty and freedom. And it seems to be working, as opinion polls show that Arab publics now favor China over the US. China's response to the war in Gaza is performative, focusing on optics rather than substance. But hey, if it gets them more business and influence, who am I to judge? Now let's move on to Putin's spending spree in Russia. The Russian economy is growing faster than the global economy, thanks to record state spending. But here's the catch: this economic growth is masking growing imbalances within the economy. Putin has to balance funding the ongoing war against Ukraine, maintaining living standards, and safeguarding macroeconomic stability. It's a classic case of trying to have your cake and eat it too. But hey, who needs a balanced economy when you can have a war, right? In other news, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's hospitalization has caused quite a stir. He didn't disclose his prolonged hospitalization to the public or the White House, leading to questions about military decision-making amid tensions in the Middle East. Austin, my friend, next time you're in the hospital, maybe send out a tweet or something to keep everyone in the loop. Just a friendly suggestion. Oh, and Boeing's 737 MAX is once again making headlines. Airlines around the world are grounding the aircraft after a section of fuselage on an Alaska Airlines plane blew out during flight. This comes after two fatal crashes involving the 737 MAX in 2019. Looks like Boeing's manufacturing controls are once again under scrutiny. Maybe they should consider adding some duct tape to their planes. It's a quick fix, trust me. Next up, Hezbollah strikes an air traffic control base in northern Israel, raising the specter of another war with Israel. The increase in fighting across the border with Lebanon adds urgency to U.S. diplomatic efforts. Let's hope Secretary of State Antony Blinken can work some magic and prevent things from spiraling out of control. We don't need any more fireworks in the Middle East. Moving on, let's talk about Myanmar's Spring Revolution and why the U.S. needs to back it. Supporting Myanmar's resistance forces would be a major victory for democracy and deter China from invading Taiwan. It's a win-win situation for the U.S. Plus, it would give them a unique advantage over China in the region. Talk about killing two birds with one stone. Or in this case, supporting one revolution with one move. And finally, we have central banks around the world preparing to ease monetary policy and cut interest rates as inflation falls. It's like a global sale on borrowing costs. Get your loans now, folks, before the rates drop even further. Just don't blame me if you end up with a mountain of debt. Well, that wraps up our news for today. I hope you enjoyed this whirlwind tour of global events. Now it's your turn to join the discussion. What are your thoughts on these headlines? Do you agree with China's strategy in Gaza? Should the US support Myanmar's resistance? And most importantly, should I dust off my espionage skills and join the spy game? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, this is Dr. Six signing off from the sixth dimension. Stay curious, my friends. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.